It is a very, very big honour to welcome our keynote speaker this evening, Lord David Wolfson KC, the Shadow Attorney General and the past Minister of Justice of the UK. Lord Wolfson is one of the most sought-after commercial silks at the English Bar and is also the trustee or patron of several Jewish organisations and charities in the UK. He is a clear voice for moral values, justice, and truth. So I am honoured to invite Lord Wolfson for the keynote address.
Mr. President, Mr. Chargé d'Affaires, distinguished colleagues, friends, thank you very much, first of all, for that very generous, indeed flattering introduction. Whenever I'm introduced in these terms, I always think that if my parents were here, my father would have absolutely no idea who you were talking about. My mother would, of course, believe it. Now, it's always a challenge to deliver an address to a distinguished audience, and tonight's star-studded guest list speaks for itself. So I sought some guidance from our hosts, and I was given some guidelines. Say something serious, they said, but not that serious. Take your time, they said, but don't speak for too long. Give us your perspective from the UK, they said, as both a lawyer and a politician. But don't be too legal, and certainly not too political. So I feel that I'm standing on the edge of a precipice. And that's especially the case, the more eagle-eyed. Well, you're all lawyers, so you're all, or nearly all lawyers, so you're all eagle-eyed. You'll have noted that for today's session in the conference, I was billed as the Shadow Attorney General, and for tonight's address, I'm billed as the Shadow Attorney General. But for tomorrow's session, I am billed as the former Shadow Attorney General. Perhaps our President knows something I don't. So, in case this is indeed my final speech as Shadow Attorney General, I wanted to say something about a subject which is important. And we gather in a place where it is impossible to speak about law without at the same time speaking about history. Warsaw is a city where the Jewish story and the legal story intersect with unique force. A city where the rule of law was destroyed, catastrophically, systematically, and with consequences that still echo today. And yet also a city where the Jewish people showed, even in their darkest hours, what it means to insist upon human dignity, upon moral justice, upon the irreducible humanity of each individual. To speak about law and justice as Jews in Warsaw is to speak with the weight of memory on our shoulders. Now, what I've just said would, I think, have been true at any time since the Shoah. But it is now especially true after October the 7th. We gather in a city where we have all seen, usually in black and white films and photographs, how thriving Jewish life was overrun by devastation. And we now look upon those same films and photographs with the images of a more recent devastation imprinted forever on and in our minds, in all their terrible reality and in sharp and unflinching colour. Now, earlier I mentioned my father, Zichrono Livracha, who passed away in March and for whom I'm still saying Kaddish. And can I just thank again all those who've been making a minyan. I'm really extremely grateful. Now, at times when I was growing up, it seemed to me that he was a Jew, and therefore he was a lawyer. At other times, it seemed to me that he brought his legal persona to animate and enhance his Jewish life. Because, of course, he was both. He was a lawyer and he was a Jew at the same time, and in a manner which was not just complementary, but essential. He was someone for whom the essence of what it is to be a lawyer and the essence of what it is to be a Jew went hand in hand. So allow me to start this evening with one of his favourite stories, one we all know so well. We begin with the first Jewish lawyer, or perhaps the first Jewish advocate, Abraham. Confronted with divine judgment on the evil city of Sodom, he asks the most audacious and also the most enduring question in all of legal philosophy. Hashofet kol haaretz lo ya'aseh mishpat. Shall the judge of all the earth not do justice? In that one line is the foundational and fundamental Jewish attitude to law. That power must be accountable, that justice must be universal, that even the highest authority is subject to moral scrutiny. Our tradition, therefore, begins with a cross-examination. And not just any cross-examination. It's a cross-examination conducted between man and God, but where man asks the questions, and God has no answer, because there is no answer to that question. There was no divine answer to Abraham's question, because as Jews, we do not only believe that God acts justly. As Jews, we believe that God is justice. Because for Jews, law has never been a luxury. It has been a necessity. Law has been our shield when we were vulnerable, our framework when we were scattered, and our identity when everything else was taken away from us. We are by temperament and by experience a legal people. We argue not because we enjoy argument. Well, not only because we enjoy argument. We argue because we believe that justice depends on reasoned disagreement. And that belief sits at the heart of the role of the Attorney General in England and Wales. The Attorney is a political figure. Yes, he or she is a member either of the House of Commons or of the House of Lords and sits for the governing party. But the Attorney is also the constitutional guardian of the rule of law. And the role of Attorney General in this guise is a peculiarly British invention, part minister, part jurist, part lightning rod. It's an office that requires you to give independent legal advice, even when it is inconvenient, to say no to colleagues who would prefer you to say yes, and to uphold without fear or favour not only what is lawful, but what preserves public confidence in the law itself. It's not a job for the faint-hearted. You need a thick skin, a sharp mind, and the ability to say with a perfectly straight face to a senior politician whose career depends on your approving his policy, I'm afraid the law does not agree with you and you can't do that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you do not need me to tell you that if the role of the Attorney General in London is difficult, the role of the Israeli Attorney General is Olympian. In Israel, the Attorney General stands at the intersection of security, politics, constitutional identity, and national trauma. The office must defend the state while constraining it, advise a government seeking to navigate the country in what seems sometimes like perpetual crisis, and protect rights in a society where every right is contested and every decision can have existential implications. It is a role without real precedent anywhere in the democratic world, It requires legal skill, moral courage, and the loneliness that comes from telling and from having to tell the most embattled democratic government on earth this far, but no further. The psalmist reminds us, Tzedek u'mishpat mechon kis'o. Justice and law are the foundations of God's throne. That's a phrase I chose when I was appointed to the House of Lords as the motto on my own coat of arms, and in the original Hebrew, I should make clear. If justice and law are the foundation of the Jewish God, they are also, I suggest, the foundation of the constitution of the Jewish state. But, and can I just say that we Jews know that there is always a but. I think Jews instinctively distrust a proposition to which there is no exception. But, at the same time, and even at the highest level, we must also, I think, acknowledge the limits of law. Stephen Zipperstein, and for those of you who are familiar with the documentary hypothesis, you will appreciate the beauty of what I'm about to say. This is Stephen E., who's the attorney and a senior fellow at UCLA, and not Stephen J., who is a professor of Judaism at Stanford. So Mr. Zipperstein, the attorney at UCLA, has recently published a very interesting and I think important study, Zionism, Palestinian Nationalism and the Law, 1939 to 1948. It's a meticulous, deeply sourced examination of how British legal structures, mandate institutions, and competing Jewish and Palestinian national movements collided in the decade before Israel's independence. And his central insight is both important and, I think, sobering. The law could manage conflict, but it could not resolve conflict. Legal mechanisms at that time were deployed with intelligence, sometimes with idealism, often with brilliant novelty. But the underlying national narratives were irreconcilable within any legal formula. And his conclusion is that law cannot deliver political reconciliation when the parties deny each other's legitimacy. The law can restrain, it can channel, it can articulate principles, but law cannot manufacture trust, and law cannot conjure peace out of incompatible visions of nationhood. Which brings me to international courts and international tribunals. As Jewish lawyers, I suggest, we understand their profound importance. A world without international law is not a world in which Jews have generally been safe. The absence of effective international institutions in the 1930s and the 1940s remains one of history's most bitter warnings. But we also today understand their deficiencies. They are only as strong as the consent which sustains them. When they overreach, they lose legitimacy. When they underreach, they lose relevance. They can deliver judgments, but not always justice. And in the post-October the 7th world, these deficiencies are especially stark. Because for us in this room, October the 7th is a wound that has not healed. For the Jewish people, it was the most brutal day since the Holocaust. But around much of the world, October the 7th is a date which hardly resonates. And we've discovered, each of us in our own circles, amongst our own friends, sometimes even amongst our own professional colleagues, how month by month over the past few years, even the clearest atrocity can dissolve in the acid of political storytelling, and that international legal institutions are not immune to that corrosive effect. And if we cannot rely on shared moral premises, then law by itself cannot save us. And yet, precisely because of those challenges, our work matters now more than ever. Because we are the heirs of Abraham, questioning, arguing, insisting on justice, even when the world is deaf to it, especially when the world is deaf to it. We are the heirs of the jurists who rebuilt Europe after the war. We're the heirs of those heroes here in Warsaw who lived and died, who lived and were murdered, not a mile away from where we sit tonight. We are the physical and spiritual and legal heirs of those Kadoshim, those martyrs who believed that humanity endures even when the law collapses. And so our task is not to pretend that law can do everything. We can't look to law to solve all our problems or heal all our divisions. We need to recognize that there is an important boundary where law ends and politics begins. Our task is to ensure that law does what it can do, with integrity, with courage, and also with humility. As the famous verse says, Tzedek, tzedek tirdof, justice, justice, shall you pursue. Not admire, not discuss, not file in triplicate, pursue. And pursue, I suggest, because you will never, perhaps you can never, fully and completely and enduringly attain complete justice. Here in Warsaw, a place where justice was denied, and where the consequences of that denial stand as a permanent warning, tonight we should reaffirm that pursuit. We will defend the law. We will defend the truth. We will defend human dignity for our people, and thereby we will defend it for all people. Because if the judge of all the earth must do justice, then surely, so also must we. Thank you.